In 1997, the ocean made a sound. It was picked up by microphones spaced over 3,000 kilometers apart at the same time. Whatever made it was loud enough to cross an entire ocean, and on paper, it looked alive. The microphones were hydrophones, built by the U.S. Navy during the Cold War to listen for enemy submarines. By the 1990s, scientists had inherited them. They used them to listen to earthquakes, whale calls, the slow, constant noise of the deep sea. They weren't expecting this. Researchers nicknamed it the bloop, a short, rising moan, then silence. On a spectrogram, a kind of visual fingerprint of a sound, it had the same shape as something alive, the same rise and fall you'd expect from a call, not a machine. There was just one problem. It was too loud. Blue whales are the loudest whales in the ocean. Their calls can hit around 188 decibels, and they can be heard for hundreds of kilometers. The bloop was picked up by hydrophones thousands of kilometers apart, farther than a blue whale's call should be able to reach. For something biological to make a sound that loud, it would have to be enormous, bigger than a blue whale, bigger than anything ever confirmed to exist in the ocean. So the theories started. A new species, something ancient that never needed to surface. The story picked up one more detail that made it spread even faster online. The general area where the sound was traced to sat near coordinates a horror writer had invented decades earlier. For a sunken city, home to something enormous, asleep at the bottom of the sea. Probably just coincidence. But it's one of the reasons this story never really died down. Then, nothing. The bloop was recorded exactly once in the summer of 1997. Researchers went back through years of hydrophone recordings, hoping to catch it again. They never did. Not that year. Not the next. Whatever made that sound made it exactly once, and never again. That's the detail that kept scientists interested for years. If it really was some undiscovered animal, where did it go? Nobody could answer that. Not yet. The answer didn't come from a better microphone or a second recording. It came from moving the microphones somewhere else entirely. NOAA started placing hydrophones much closer to Antarctica for a completely different project, listening for underwater volcanoes and earthquakes near the seafloor. And the closer they listened to the ice, the more familiar something started to sound. Antarctica is loud, in a way most people never think about. Glaciers don't sit still. They creep forward constantly until massive slabs crack off into the ocean. Ice grinds against rock. It fractures under its own weight over and over all year. Every one of those events sends a sound through the water, a low, rising groan as ice tears away from ice. Researchers lined those sounds up next to the bloop. They matched. Not roughly. Almost exactly. Same rise in pitch. Same shape. Same duration. Just at a smaller scale. The bloop wasn't a smaller version of one of those events. It was a massive one. The sound of an enormous piece of Antarctic ice cracking away from a glacier, far bigger than the ice quakes researchers were used to hearing. And that eerie, almost biological quality that had convinced people it was alive, fracturing ice can do that too. It can rise and fall in pitch in a way that just happens to resemble a living voice. A few years later, researchers watched it happen in real time. A massive iceberg broke apart near South Georgia Island and produced a sound with the same signature. This is now the leading, most evidence-backed explanation NOAA has for the bloop. Not every researcher agrees on every detail. Some think the match isn't perfect. But the case for ice, not animal, is by far the strongest one on the table. Here's the part that doesn't get talked about as much. The bloop wasn't a one-time event. It's happening constantly. NOAA's hydrophones near Antarctica now pick up sounds like it. Ice quakes, tens of thousands of times a year. The ocean down there was never quiet. We just weren't listening in the right place, back in 1997. And as the planet warms, ice near Antarctica cracks and breaks away more often than it used to, which means the sound of the bloop, that exact sound, is playing somewhere in the Southern Ocean right now as you watch this. There was never a creature at the bottom of the Pacific There was something bigger than that, an entire continent, quietly cracking apart, one groan at a time. And for years, the only proof anyone had was a single, unexplained sound that vanished as fast as it came.